Alright, in this lesson we're going to find the distance between the 2 points 1, 2 and 5, 5. So first of all, let's put the 2 coordinates on our axis. So the point 1, 2 means 1 on the x and 2 on the y, so that's there. The point 5, 5 is 5 along the x, 5, and 5 along the y. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our 2 points here at 1, 2 and at 5, 5. Now what we need to do is get the distance between those 2 points. So we want the distance from there all the way up to there. Now if you had a ruler you could possibly measure it, but that would depend on your graph being to scale and your ruling being accurate. That distance there is what we want to find. Now to do this more accurately, we're going to use our old friend Pythagoras, which you should remember from the first semester. So what I'm going to do is make a right-angled triangle here. If you remember our Pythagoras theorem, instead of that being called D, our hypotenuse, if you remember that word, we called C. So let's just call it C. And you should remember the formula, C squared equals A squared plus B squared, where C here was the hypotenuse, A and B were these other two sides here and here. So what we need to do in order to find our hypotenuse is know the length of this side and this side here. So let's have a look. This x, this length along our x-axis, if you recall, that one there is the x-axis. This one up here is the y-axis. So our length along the x-axis, we're going from 1 all the way up to 5. So that distance is a distance of 4 units. There's a space of 4 units between here and here. This distance here is the distance along our x-axis from 2 up to 5. Now if you do 5 take away 2, you're going to find that distance is 3. So going back over here to Pythagoras theorem, to find our C, we do C squared is 3, I might do the x first, 4 squared plus 3 squared. And we could go and work that out using Pythagoras, and if you remember, we work out this one, we work out that one, and the very last step is that we take the square root of whatever answer we get for this. This is the basis here of finding the distance between 2 points. But we don't want to have to draw up this graph every time. We want to be able to do it just by looking at our points here and here and finding a way of being able to do it. So let's have a look. Instead of calling it C, let's call it D for distance. So our formula is D equals, now we've got a square root on our formula, let's write the square root out. Now to get this length 4, what we did was we got the length, the distance between our two x values. This x value and this x value, we just did 5, take away 1, and we got this length of 4. So we want to get the difference between our two x values, and then we squared it. The problem is though, if I just say x, take away x, it's a little bit difficult to work out, am I talking about this one? Do I do this one minus that one, or this one minus that one? So we just call them x, the first x value and the second x value. It doesn't really matter which one's which, but I'm just going to say, look what we did. We did 5, the second x value, take away 1, which was the first x value. So I'm going to call those x2 and x1. So that's how we got the 4. We took the two x values away. How did we get the 3? Well, that was the difference between our two y values. We did 5, take away 2, and we got that 3. So that's what we need to put in here. let's get the two y values, take them away from one another, and then the last thing we did was square it. But again, let's call them the second y value, take away the first y value. Now, if you have a look in your textbook, that is the formula that gets used all the time when you want to get the distance between 2 points. And let's just put a big box around that so we can see it. The formula for getting the distance between 2 points is the difference between the two x values squared, the difference between the two y values squared. So let's see how that would work using this formula and our points up here. So to get the distance, we're going to do the square root of the second x value, take away the first x value. So I'm going to go 5, take away 1, squared. Then I'm going to do the difference between our two y values. So that's 5, take away 2, squared. If you get your calculator, you should be able to put this in one step. The whole thing should work out very nicely to be an answer of 5. Just put that all in one step in your calculator and you should be right. Now let's try another example, but this time I'm just going to use our formula. I'm not even going to worry about a graph. So over on our next page, find the distance between the points -1, 3 and 4, 5. Whenever you're doing this, the first thing you're going to do is label your two sets of brackets. So I'm going to say, all right, this is going to be my x1 and my y1, which is the x and the y from the first bracket. This is going to be my x2, y2. It doesn't really matter which way you go, so long as both points in the first bracket are your 1s and both points in your second bracket are your 2s. Okay, so that's the first step. Second step is write down the formula, and that's the formula that we just came up with on the previous page. So we need to write down that the distance is going to be the square root of the two x values subtracted from one another squared plus the difference between the two y values squared. Let's just extend that across there. The next step is substitute the values from the brackets. So what this is saying is get the x value from the second bracket. Well, we called this one x2, so I'm just going to put in d is the x from the second bracket is 4 minus the x from the first bracket up here, which is -1. Be really careful of your minuses here. And then we square it. Plus, let's get the two y values together. So the y from the second bracket is 5. The y from the first bracket is 3. And I square it. Then, the very last step is to calculate the distance. Now, key this in exactly as is on your calculator. You're going to put in the big square root bracket, the big square root, you're going to open your bracket, you're going to put a takeaway, you're going to put a negative there, you're going to do all of that, and you'll get your answer. I'll give you a moment to calculate yours, and then you can see whether you match my answer. So grab your calculator now. All right, how did you go? I think when you work all of this out, you should get an answer of 5.385, which we will round off to 5.39. As you do always when you're doing math, just go back and check your question. Do they want 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places? And are there any units involved in the question? Because if they're talking in centimetres or metres, make sure you put your units on yours. Okay, you should be able to do some of the first question of the exercise on finding distance between 2 points.